Welcome in. It is day 250, and you're speaking to the Meeples Champion. And today we're going to be going over a game that I have not played in quite a long time. It was one of the first co-op games I actually enjoyed. I'm not a huge co-op player. It's definitely not a game I'm looking to play again. But at the time when I had a few friends who were really into it, and they really wanted to play a bunch, I didn't mind. The game is called Police Precinct. Now, I don't have the game with me. Again, this was an older friend's copy. I haven't seen them or the game in a while, and I wasn't going to go and pick this up just to review. So I'm just going to be going over this. I'll pop up a picture here for you, see if I can get some shots for you to get some ideas what the board looks like. The concept is pretty straightforward. So you are all playing cops, and you basically have a precinct that you're in charge of. Now, you can control your police cars, you can move them around, you can block certain buildings, you can go to certain locations so that you can check. You're essentially got different locations that potentially crime has occurred, and you're moving around the board and having to time it right because you're trying to find your clues to catch a murderer. But you have to make sure that you're working as a team, and you have to make sure that you're utilizing everything in just the right amount of time. You have to find, say, about 8 pieces of information, and you have 10 different locations that you can find this in roughly. And once you find a piece, you have to be able to move on and find the next piece. And you have to be able to find things in the right order. You have to make sure that you're slowly whittling down and getting closer to where it is that you need to figure out is your situation to catch your perp. If you're not fast enough, they're going to get away. And if you go way too diving deep into a certain area, you're going to basically waste your time. You could dive into it and find extra things that could help you speed up, and it could help it so that you have more access to squad cars, locations. But if you're not paying attention to the board and to how everything's working, and if you're not talking to each other and working as a team, you can really get yourself stuck. It's an interesting game. It does something that I find is very important with co-ops, which is it kept you away from working as a team that somebody could easily just lead in a direction. You were not sitting in a situation where you had to do A and then B and then C, and somebody knew that and just kept telling everybody what to do. You all could have different opinions when it came to how to achieve your goals. So you could have somebody go in one direction, somebody go in another, somebody go in another, and all still be able to achieve the goal as a group, even though you disagreed on how to achieve it. You know, once you do it, you just have to be able to adapt to each other enough to realize, well, if you're going to do that, then I'm not going to do it because we're not wasting our time. But sometimes you could. You might have 2 people go to the same location because you're able to both hit the same deck, and as a result, you're able to get through those cards quick and find something and go, well, there was a chance we could have found a piece of information here and a piece of information here, but we had, maybe a 10% chance in each deck, and now we have a 20% chance here, and as a result of doing it this way, we actually found something. It's an interesting game. It leans in a few directions, but why don't we jump in, talk our 7 categories, and see where this game lands for us. When it comes to the art, it's nothing wrong about it. If you're looking for a game about police, then this game's going to just jump out at you. The issue for me is that this is not a game that necessarily is attractive to those not looking for police. It's not an ugly box. It's very police centric. I have no issue with a game that has police as a piece to it. It was a fun co-op. As I said at the time, it was my favorite co-op. But to me, the box, it's mediocre at best. When you set the board up, the board, I think, doesn't have to grab you as a police-only fan, but it's also less attractive than the board was. So while the box would be very attractive to a police fan and maybe not as attractive to other people, the game is more attractive in general, but still doesn't have as high of a point as that box did for the fans of a police-centric game. Overall, I think the art is mediocre. It's got to be a thumbs down. When it comes to the components, you've got a boatload of different little decks all around the board, and those are pretty good cards. I'd say that they're nice card stock. They're not going to wear easily. And then you got a lot of cardboard for your police, for your items that you've collected, putting in front of you. I think that they did a fine job on this. The copy that we played definitely held up well, so thumbs up. Your price. It's not a cheap game. I'd say this game's maybe 50 if you're lucky, probably more in that 60 range, could even be more than that. It's a reasonably large game, not huge, but large. I think that this game is one that, if I'm trying to judge it accurately, I would say that this is a game that it's just not worth its price. It's a bit too much for a game that really needs a group, so it's not going to get played often, and that it just doesn't strike it right for me. I think that this is one of those games that you've got to be okay with finding somebody in a group that's willing to pick it up so the group can enjoy it. And you don't want more than one person owning it. And you got to make sure it's going to really hit for your group. I really have no interest in going back to this game. I played it a few times back in the day. They were reasonably long games, but not horrible games. I had an okay time, but I don't want to play it again. And I just feel like this is a game that it's only got so much life to it. I would much rather invest more money in, say, a Twilight Imperium game that might be played even less when I first get it than this would be, but has a longer life to it. 10 years later, I could still play that game. 10 years later, I wouldn't be playing this game. So for me, price to the game just doesn't match up. Thumbs down. Your difficulty. It's up to how you play. Are you okay with a co-op? A co-op is the type of game that if you're up for co-ops, then I think the difficulty for this is okay, and that it would be good for experienced, expert, beginner. If you're not okay with a co-op, I think that this loses your beginners, and it even loses a lot of your experienced. I think that, the expert players, people do enjoy it. But for me, I just feel like this is a game that I'm not bringing a kid in for it. I don't want a beginner in for it. I really don't want to have an experienced player playing this. I only want to play this with the expert level, and even then, it's the people who specifically play co-ops, and I'm not going to be doing that. And I feel none of you are going to be doing that, so it's got to be a thumbs down. Replayability. It's not a horrible game. I don't know if this is one that if you were to lose it, you'd pull it out and play right away again. But I do think this is one that you'd want to face it a few times and see if you can beat it. And there's different, your scenario could shift up a bit. It's not going to be the exact same thing every time. So there's some option there. I think that this has a little bit more replayability for me than, say, a Forbidden Island, Forbidden Desert type game. Because this is going to be a little different every time. Whereas that's the same game, just everything's been kind of shifted up a bit. I think this game does have a little bit more variability to it. So I think it has the opportunity for the replayability in that regard. However, if I'm going to be honest about it, the issue with the game is that I just don't think you're going to get to the table enough. I don't think that most people want to play the game that it's going to get the replayability. It's got to be a thumbs down. Keys to victory. I mean, it's kind of straightforward. You get your scenario. You need to go catch the bad guy. Go catch the bad guy. You got to find the card. You got to make sure you make your arrest. I don't feel like this game gives you a lot of option there. Yes, the way you can go get these, whether you're teaming up, whether you're surrounding, whether you're going to individual spots, that's on you. You can make that decision. But beyond that, as far as what are your options in the game, the options are to go find those pieces of information. You've got to find that proof. So I don't feel like there's a lot of keys to victory here, even though the routes to that same piece of information are there. There are more routes to victory, but there aren't a lot of keys. It's just a lot of routes to the key. But there's only the one key. It's got to be a thumbs down there. Unique. Is the game unique? No. It's got a unique theme. I mean, I can't really think of many cop-themed games, so I'll give it that. It's a unique theme. But outside of that, most of these games are about going and looking through a pile and trying to find the information you need to gather so that you eventually can say, I solved it. And you could almost lean in the direction of saying that this is kind of luck-based or stat-based. Well, there's X amount of cards in a pile. There's X amount of piles. There's X amount of things we need. We know that there's one per pile, and we know that there's this many piles. So if we needed 8 pieces, there's 10 piles. And there's this many odds of the things. What's the best way to hit the odds up to try to see if you can find those? it's not as variable or flexible as I'd like. But we've seen these games. We've seen a lot of games that at least incorporate a lot of what that is. And for me, that's just, it's not unique enough. I think it needs a little bit more. It's got to be a thumbs down. Overall, what do I think? It was a nice game 10 years ago for me to play with friends, to give me a little bit of an introduction to a co-op that I didn't mind. It was a nice game for people who were fresh out of college, for newer gamers that were just starting to kind of get their feet wet, and get a feel for what types of games and variabilities were out there. But in the long run, I don't think this one holds up. I think that it doesn't become a bad game. It just doesn't hold on enough to be a constantly replayed game. And for that reason, I wouldn't recommend anybody buying it. Give it a try, and maybe it hits for you, and that's great if it does. But I just don't think it's worth picking up. I think it's more of a game that go and see if you can play it at a convention, or if a local board game store has it and you can pay the $5 to play the game in the back room for the day. Well, it has been day 250, and we've been speaking about the game Police Precinct. And you've been speaking to the Meeples Champion. Like, share, subscribe, and check down below in the description. I'll be adding in an Amazon link in case you want to get this game for your collection. Until next time, I'll talk to you tomorrow.